Let's give a nice welcome to talk about the collaborative imperative, 3 keys to working together better. Jeff Abels with C5 Insight. Let's give Jeff a nice welcome here. Jeff, take it away.
Thank you all for coming. Hey, we're going to get started. We're kind of getting into the afternoon now. A couple of people have said the morning has been so loaded with value that they're almost overwhelmed. So we're going to kind of start with something to loosen us up a little bit. If everybody would stand up. Go ahead, stand up. It's okay. This is about collaboration. So we're going to do a little exercise here, a very simple one. I want every single person to get into the Superman or Superwoman pose. Hands and fists on your hips, legs out. Try not to elbow anybody or step on anybody's toes. And hold that pose for just a couple of minutes while I give a quick intro here. So the Center for Creative Leadership tells us that 86% of business leaders say that collaboration is one of the most important skills that needs to be had by their team. But only 7% of those same people say that their teams are good at it. So we have 30 minutes today to talk about a 79% gap between one of the most important skills and business's ability to execute on that skill. So let's jump right in. You can unsuperman, unsuperwoman, and have a seat. Hey, as we get started here, I know some of you are already social collaborators on the social stratosphere here, so if you want to tweet, there's some social hashtags up there. We have one specific for this session, but of course there's the event one up there too. So, and there's a little bit about me up there, but that's enough about me. Let me get to know you guys just a little bit better. This tends to be a marketing event, so how many of you, by show of hands, would say your job function tends to be largely marketing? It's hard for me to see with the lights. Okay, a good number of you. What about more sales or direct business development, direct interface with the customer? Who would say they have that as more responsible? Okay, and who thinks of themselves more of an executive? They have responsibility for a lot of those things. Okay, last show of hands, how about information technology? Do we have any IT people here? Okay, not a single one in the room. Good, we can talk a lot about them today. What about, last show of hands here, who comes from organizations that have more than one office spread out geographically? Good number, maybe a third or 50% of people. Okay, there's some unique collaboration challenges with that. So thank you. Thank you for letting me get to know you a little bit better before we jump right into this. So this is a B-17 Flying Fortress World War II bomber. What on earth can modern collaboration learn from a World War II bomber? Well, as it turns out, it can learn quite a bit. In World War II, the Allies, as you may know, depended heavily on this machine to turn the tide of the war. A lot of them were being launched out of the UK, and one problem they were having, which is a significant one, was many of them were not coming back. So this 25 tons of steel with 10 people on board, losing one of them was losing a lot of human life. Losing one of them was losing a lot of investment, but losing one of them also meant you were losing potentially the battle for winning the war. This was a serious problem they were looking at. So the military analysts got together and looked at the bombers that came back. And they looked at them and said, where do they have the most bullet holes? We can't put armor all over these planes because it will make them too heavy. They either won't get off the ground or they'll be even slower moving targets for the enemy to shoot down. So we have to be selective about where we put our armor. So they looked at where the most bullet holes were in those airplanes, and they said, let's reinforce the armor in those places. So they did that, off the airplanes went, and after a couple of runs, they realized the same number of bombers were getting shot down. The same number of people weren't coming back home. It was a terrible dilemma that they were in. And that introduces us to the story of collaboration. Collaboration, like that story of failure, is something that most businesses are failing at today. Gartner, an organization many of you have heard of, it's a technology research company, has said 80% of collaboration projects are failing and will continue to fail for quite a while going into the future. So, and by the way, as you monitor the Twitter channels here, we're tweeting some more information and statistics on some of these slides. So keep an eye out for those. There's kind of some bonus content that's coming out there. 80% of these projects are failing. Our own experience is somewhere between 60 and 65% are failing. Here's how we came up with that number. We went and looked at our own portfolio of business and said, of the projects we're being asked to get involved in, the collaboration projects, how many of those are recovery projects? Someone coming and saying, something's broken badly here. And how many of those are brand new projects? People saying we want to implement something new within our organization. about 60% of the projects we're being asked to participate in are recovery projects. CPR projects is what we call them. So whether you have 60% or 80%, the failure rate is abysmal, and we've got to do something about it. So what can we do about it? Let's go back to our bomber story. You're probably wondering, well, what happened? And I still don't get what that has to do with this. So into that bomber story entered an individual named Abraham Wald. Abraham was a Jewish mathematician and a refugee from Hungary. And he took a look at what the military analysts did and said, you're looking at the wrong airplanes. You're measuring the wrong thing. You're measuring success. You're measuring the airplanes that are coming back, not the ones that are still over there. Now, we don't have the luxury of going and looking at them, but what I can tell you is probably those airplanes are getting shot where these ones are not. So take the armor, look at the airplanes that came back, and measure your failure, not your success. Learn from your failure, not your success. So here's what collaboration can learn from that. Most events that I attend, most of the stories I hear, are the case studies and the success stories of collaboration that's working well. And those are great. We'll tell a few of those today. But the reality is we can learn a lot more from our failures to make us successful than we can by measuring our success. We're measuring the wrong thing in most cases. So we're going to talk some about success today, but we're going to talk a lot about failure today as well. So here's a good success statistic overall. Most of you have probably heard of the Gallup organization. Gallup is an organization that does lots and lots of research. They do employee engagement research, among other things. They've come up with a pretty amazing statistic that says if you can truly engage, collaborate with your employees, your workforce, and your customers, if you can engage with them, you can have phenomenal, almost unbelievable benefits to your organization. Gallup does a lot of other in-depth research, and one of the things they did was they've broken employees out into 3 groups. And for almost every organization over about 10 to 20 employees, these percentages are remarkably close one to the other. They found that 30% of employees in a typical workplace are what they call actively engaged. These are the orange dots in that kind of complex picture over there. These are the lifeblood of any organization. They're the stars. They're the people that exude energy and people want to be in orbit around them. Then they said there's the middle tier, which are the people who are, they call them disengaged, but they kind of come in, they do their work, they work a reasonable number of hours and all those things, and they do what they're told, and they go home. They're not passionately engaged, but they're still doing their part. And then there's the actively disengaged, the black dots up there. Here, these are the folks that are actively destroying value in the company. They're actively making things worse. For whatever reason, they've made up their mind and it's really not a place that they want to be a part of, but they're continuing to hang on and they're making things tougher for everybody else. 24% of the people in organizations are actively disengaged. They're kind of like black holes. They suck the light and the energy out of the people around them. And we probably all know people like that in our workplaces on all ends of the scale. We've probably all been in all ends of those scales throughout our careers at different times, too. Another thing we know from McKinsey research that about 28 hours of the average worker's week are wasted because they're collaborating around things that are not managed efficiently. 2 of those things are, number 1, searching for information that they need to get their jobs. It's amazing in today's world, we've come to realize that we are less efficient at finding the information we need to get our jobs done than in the old world of paper-based filing cabinets because it's so complex and stored in so many places. And do you know the number 1 place people go to search for the information they need to get their jobs done? To their coworkers. So not only are they wasting time trying to find that vital bit of information, but now that bleeds out to other people who are now saying, hey, can you find that proposal we did? Can you find that statistic we had? Can you find that past thing we did with this organization? They're creating a vast time sink. Another huge time sink is sending and responding to email. It's a hugely interrupting technology platform that's destroying a lot of productivity these days. And in fact, the average worker in the U.S. works 7 hours of overtime every week, works a 47-hour work week. And you can be sure those orange dots, they're way beyond the 7 hours. So they're the ones who are pulling the curve up towards 7 or more hours. Why they're doing it? Because our businesses have not learned to collaborate well together. MIT research tells us that if we could take the bottom 5%, some of the folks who are the most actively disengaged in our organization, just the bottom 5% of employees in any organization, and we could make them average in their ability to collaborate. Not a huge move, just from actively disengaged to just disengaged, to neutral. We would save the other 95% of people in our organizations almost 4 hours of time every single week. A small change for a very small group of people in every organization can result in a 10% gift back to them of work-life balance, or just being freed up to think more creatively about what they do. Another individual, Mark Brennevetter, was a researcher, a sociologist actually, back in the 70s, and he found that when he looked at these connections between people, he said there's an unbelievable amount of strength in our weakest connections. This is kind of the heart of collaboration. What I mean by that is our strong connections, the people we're happy to work with and we work with in and out, day in and day out of our work lives, we have a tremendous amount in common with them. We're probably attracted to them partly because of that. We're less threatened by them. But they don't have much to teach us. They don't have much knowledge to expand our knowledge base with, because we share a lot of common ground with them. But if we can identify our weakest connections and put those on the project teams with other people that they're not strongly connected to, it will absolutely make a difference in the power of innovation and partnership and collaborations coming from an organization. And the good news is, in today's world, we have the technology to measure this. We can now start looking at these things and saying, if we can connect some of our stars to some of our people who aren't stars, we're going to start to turn that around. If we can connect our stars to neutral people, they're going to become stars themselves. And when you create another star, you lower the workload for every other star in our organization, which are some of the hardest working, most overworked people out there. We can measure how strong the connections are, the positivity and negativity of connections, and we can understand who we need to connect with better to make our workplaces a stronger place. Now, the other dimension of why collaboration is an imperative, aside from what we just talked about, aside from that it can make our corporate performance stronger than ever before, is the fact that we're living in a changing world. Look, for the past 100 years, it's no secret, machines have been replacing people in the workforce. Starting with the earliest types of machines that automated certain heavy-duty work jobs, factory floors, and now we're talking about everything from cabin bus drivers to cashiers. And with the rollout of artificial intelligence and robotics and those kinds of things, that pace is only going to quicken over the years. So technology that created this need and this ability to collaborate better is actually making collaboration an imperative, because it's one of the few things that will probably differentiate us from the things that can replace us in our jobs. The ability to work together, to create, to innovate, to compete, to improve. These are things that's going to be very difficult for artificial intelligence and technology to replace. Maybe one day out in the future we'll have to worry about that too. But the very thing that makes us human, the ability to connect with other people, whether it's inside or outside of our organizations, that's becoming more and more the absolute crucial skill set that you can't take away with a piece of machinery. It's something that the humans have to still continue to do. So important now for productivity, important long-term as a skill that all of us need to have a career in the changing world. Okay, so what are we doing wrong? 80%, 60% failure rate. Let's talk about 3 things. There's really dozens, but as we've looked at this and analyzed it, we've come up with 3 that are pretty common everywhere. The first is an over-focus on technology. So we actually did a little bit of research about a year ago, and we started asking about, are you succeeding, are you failing, how have you been doing with certain types of collaboration projects? For one particular type of collaboration project, we said, how many times have you tried? Now, our theory, and in fact we've built some of our marketing strategy on this theory, was the second timers are much better than the first timers, right? The first timers, they fail, they learn their lesson, and they're going to be easier for us to work with because they're ready to really invest in the right things to be successful. So we thought we'd see first time failure rate pretty high, second time way smaller, and then maybe a few left in the third time. What we found is the definition of insanity. Collaboration projects fail about as often on the first time as they do on the second time as they do on the third time. We're putting the armor on the wrong parts of the plane. We're learning the wrong lessons from our failed collaboration initiatives. And one of the key areas that people tend to focus on is, I can solve my collaboration problems with technology. Now, make no mistake, technology is a great thing, but it's not the only thing. And when it comes to collaboration, it's really one of the least important things. Yes, you need it. Yes, you can benefit from it. But organizations that throw technology at a collaboration problem almost always not only don't solve the collaboration problem, they make the problem worse and bigger than it was before. Now, one of the things when organizations throw technology at any problem, particularly collaboration, is they don't plan. They go into it thinking, look, here's my collaboration boat. If I pile into this boat, it has the wind in its sail, and it's going to sail us in the right direction. They have no idea what the right direction is. And the reality is, the direction is different and unique for every organization. The successful folks have taken the time to really develop a vision and a plan, a roadmap for where this is going to take them. They ask themselves, where do we want to be 3 or 5 years from now as a result of this? But they also ask themselves, and what are the baby steps we're going to take over the next few months? They also ask, how do we measure it? And the best ones are measured in 2 ways. Yes, they focus on ROI, the return on their investment. So ROI is something like saying, hey, look, over the next 3 years, if we do a good job of collaborating better, we're going to save $1 million in cost by making our people more efficient. And they can quantify that around things like how much time is lost doing certain things that I mentioned in some of the earlier statistics. That's ROI. That's great. That's important to measure. It's not always easy to capture on the back end to find out if you've really met it, but it's good to at least predict. Value is a different metric. Value are the intangible things that can absolutely fundamentally change the success trajectory of a company. Value is things like, you know what, we can innovate at a much faster pace than we could before by collaborating better, by working together better, by getting our employees engaged in the whole process with us. We can give back to our employees. We can respect them and give them back hours in their weeks that they would otherwise have to give to us if we figure out a successful and streamlined way to do this. So value and ROI is one thing that the winners focus on the front end. If you look at the failed projects, there's rarely any focus on this. It's much more of a, we know we've got a problem, let's quickly throw something on it. The leaders have something else to focus on that's more important. Which brings us to the third point. The third area where collaboration goes wrong is leadership. Now, when I talk to people in small meetings about this, they typically shake their heads yes and say, yeah, that's self-explanatory, we get it. And then when we look at it on the back end, we realize this is not as self-explanatory as people think it is. When most people hear leadership, when most leaders hear leadership, they think, I approved the project, I signed off on the budget, heck, I even sat in on monthly status meetings. I was a leader of the project. So here's a real question to ask yourself about collaboration. If at the end or during the cycle of a collaboration project, for those of you who've tried to do better collaboration, technology-driven or otherwise, ask yourself this question. Do I feel like I'm more connected and closer to the CEO of my company now that we're collaborating better than I did beforehand? If you're not doing it right. Leadership needs to see collaboration first and foremost as a leadership tool. Not a tool that they give to their people as a gift for them to work together, but a gift they give the whole company to create a shorter line between themselves and every other person in the company. And if they successfully do that, everyone else in the company creates tighter connections with everyone else too by following the leader, by following the example. We're saying again, collaboration is a leadership tool first and foremost. It's not something you get your people to do, it's something you lead your people in doing. So, this is a pretty well-known person who's famous for saying this and for a few other things. We can't solve these problems the same way we created them. Why has collaboration become such a problem? Technology created it, right? Because of wonderful technology, we have so much more data than we ever had before. Big data, people call it. But big data people think about as analytics. We have more information just in terms of emails and voice conversations and comments on social posts and versions of proposals floating around and marketing material and digital assets and video to filter through to try to find what we need that we've ever had before. Collaboration is needed to improve that. We have businesses that can be global and appear overnight with complex relationships you couldn't have even begun to fathom in a world without technology before. Collaboration needs to help us solve that. And I'm not saying that technology is not a part of the picture, but technology alone is not going to solve the problem. It created the problem by throwing it at a lot of other problems that were a good thing to throw it at. Now we need to back up and have a new perspective. So what we have found is the most effective is to say, forget about this business thing. Forget about this big organization thing. Let's get back to the basics. Let's look at how people, life on life, individual and individual, what they have done to become the best collaborators the world has seen. And after looking at this for a number of years, there's 4 things. Collaborators, individuals or collaborators, they listen to each other. They actually listen to what other people say, but they don't just listen, they remember. They write it down in their brain so that they can access that information later. They listen carefully and they remember. Then they understand. Most of you have probably heard of Stephen Covey. He's the one who said, we don't have a listening problem. Our problem is we listen to respond. We need to listen to understand. The best collaborators in the world, they listen to really get, where is this person coming from? What's the context of your life? What's going on in your paradigm that's hard for me to understand and relate to in mine? How can I build some context into this relationship? The best collaborators in the world, then they connect. Then they can have a much more meaningful, relevant conversation with the people that they've taken the time to understand. And the last thing that they do is they are learners. They're constantly learning. They're constantly looking at things saying, okay, I just tried to connect with this person. Something didn't work very well. What have I learned about this person and about myself that the next time I interact with this person I can be stronger with? They look at it at a mega level too. Where am I doing great overall? And where am I failing? How can I improve myself as a human being? It's a simple principle. 4 simple things, but there's a lot of nuances to those things. So now, what can businesses learn about that? How can we take what the best individuals do and make it function at scale? So here's what the winners, what the success stories in collaboration do well. When they listen, they remember. They have ways to capture things into a corporate memory. Now it's no longer getting individuals to listen and remember, though you need people like that in your business too, but the business itself has a corporate memory, a way of remembering what is it that this customer is saying? What is this conversation, this dialogue we had internally? What decision do we make on that policy when we walk out of the room so we don't have to reinvent it 2 or 3 months from now when it comes up again? How can we actually have a corporate memory that everybody can access? Which brings us to the understand piece. Organizations that are successful with collaboration make that corporate memory easy to access, easy to search, easy to filter in the right context for every role in their organization. Think about the individual who collaborates well. The eyes have to take in certain things and knowledge that helps the rest of the body, the hands and the legs know what to do. But the hands and the legs and the ears take in other things that the eyes need to know also. And all of those have a different context for their role in running your body. The business is the same. So it's not one-size-fits-all corporate memory. It's different people in the organization, different lines of business, different roles in the organization need to be able to access this corporate memory in a context that's meaningful to them, that they can apply and that they can make decisions with. Then those individuals can connect. And by the way, this is one of the key areas. Technology can cover a lot of this, but this is one of the key areas where people throw the technology at it. And this is where you're ready for the technology if you can do it. Those great social tools where you can actually engage with each other in real-time relationships and connect in meaningful, impactful ways, but not just connect, also remember what happened in the connection and understand it. And the 4th way is the way that most organizations fail at the most frequently. Remember, the best collaborators in the world are learners. And the best organizations at collaboration are organizations that are absolutely committed to learning and improving. One of the things we run into time and time again, when we think about the dots that we saw earlier, the bright dots and the black holes and the folks in between, the folks who are most disengaged, the folks who are most disenfranchised, are often the ones who don't understand the score. The score is, what's the score of the company? How is it doing? What's my role in impacting that score? How can I have a role? How can my voice be heard in that? This is such a chronic problem in organizations that when we consult with them, we've actually developed a whole process called LUT Score just to bring more people into this conversation around how can I actually make a difference for the company. If you engage people in that kind of conversation, you'll be surprised at people you thought, these guys wouldn't care about these numbers, they wouldn't understand the numbers if we told them, and yet if they really understand how they can have an impact, You will be amazed at how people working on a factory floor can understand detailed financial information that you thought was just the purview of accountants in your organization. This ability to learn and know is absolutely metrics driven, and every person in your organization can own access to those metrics and make a difference for you. So the principle is simple. The nuances are many. But if you want to remember a simple acronym for it, it's the LUCK principle. Listen, understand, connect, know. You can apply it personally, you can apply it to your organization. Now, as we took another look at this, starting a few years ago, we started asking ourselves, of all the companies we work with, what are the other differences between the ones that succeed and the ones that fail with this? Now, our not-so-hidden agenda with this was we wanted to discover something that we could control. Something that we could say, we found another secret ingredient here that if you hire us, we can make a difference for you. And we were really disappointed to find out this is something we have relatively little control over when it comes to our clients. It's what we call the good luck principle. Organizations that are the best at collaborating, that are the best at embracing new ways to collaborate with each other, are organizations that know who they are and they believe in people. In other words, are organizations that have made the realization that business, after all, is really always about people. It's not about money. It's not about finances. It's not about great products. It's about people. It's about passionately serving the customer. And it's about serving back to back and side to side with each other in that passionate pursuit. And I don't want to oversimplify it and say that if you just do that, the money will come. It doesn't. You've got to focus on the financials too. But what we found is the people who live out a mission, the organizations that live out a mission that's people-centric, are the ones that most rapidly adapt new ways of collaborating with each other most readily. So if you think about it, when you're having a conversation, who always hears what you said? You do. What the research showed is in organizations that have a written mission statement versus organizations that don't have a written mission statement, there's almost no difference in how successful they are with adopting collaboration or even becoming profitable. But organizations that live out a mission statement that's based on people and integrity almost always outperform the organizations that don't. So it's more important to live out a mission than it is to have one in writing. When we did our Superman pose earlier, psychiatrists tell us that when you do that, you're telling your body something about yourself. You're telling your body, I'm big, I'm blown up, I'm a puffer fish, I'm confident, I feel good. And usually if you sit down and think about it for a second, you kind of say, hey, I kind of got a little adrenaline burst from that. I kind of felt a little wave of confidence. Now, if you do that once a year, and the rest of the year you're curled up in the fetal position under your desk, you're telling yourself something else. That's what mission is. It's the voices we hear inside of our company day in and day out. It's not that once a year CEO address, and it's not that written mission statement. Those might be important elements, but if you're not living up to those in every conversation, you're losing your sense of purpose. A really important and subtle thing. Culture matters. Now, am I sure about that? Well, let's consult another expert. Probably the leading guy in the 20th century, if not ever, about business strategy. This is a guy who thought deeply. He wrote stuff 50 years ago that when you read it today, it's more relevant and impactful than a lot of current modern business authors. Peter Drucker. And when he looked at it, he said, you know, at the end of the day, culture eats strategy for breakfast. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. And if you have a great culture and no strategy, your team's going to figure it out. If you have an awesome strategy and no culture, you're going to struggle. You may not fail, but you're going to struggle in a different way. So a case study. Telstra is an Australian-based telecommunications company. When they began their collaboration initiative, it started from the top. The CEO got directly involved in this, David Thodey. So they developed a long-term plan and a vision. David got his executive team involved, and they actually started rolling out simple questions. This is just one isolated incident where he said, hey, everybody, tell me what the big time wasters are. Tell me what frustrates you about working around here. And I guarantee you we're either going to explain it or we're going to change it. If there's a reason it needs to exist, we'll explain it. If there's not, we're going to change it for you. He didn't just stop there. There were over 800 replies, and this is before it was all said and done. He actually brought his entire executive team in and said, every single one of us are going to own one of these. We're going to categorize it. We're going to respond to it. We're going to make sure we respect the time our people have given us to this, and we're going to try to give back to them to make this place a better, more efficient place to run. Now, where did that come from? It came from culture. It came from the heart and soul of the guy running the company and how he felt about doing these things. So, in closing, 3 quick keys to success. Before I get into those, the main thing is remember the luck principle. Whether you're trying to improve how you collaborate one-on-one in your organization or across a team, the luck principle has a lot of value and merit for you to think about. Again, it seems ridiculously simple. It's remarkably nuanced. As you go around and around that loop every time, you'll start to understand different dimensions and factors you can actually bring in. And if you're trying to do that across a massive group and leverage technology to do it, start thinking about, we need to have a strategy and a plan in place. What is our vision? What's the ROI? What's the value you expect? We need leadership that will lead the project. We need leadership that will own this as a leadership tool, not just as something that they're giving away. And understand your culture. You're going to have some limitations there. It's probably going to be frustrating. Understand your ability to have some influence on that culture overall. If you can move the needle a little bit on your culture, that alone might have more impact than anything else you can do. And we're right up against the time frame, but I'll try to take a couple of questions. I'll be up here for a little while. I'll be out by our booth afterwards. Thank you all so much. This has been wonderful. You've been a great audience.